Bounding into Comics and Brett R. Smith present An Escape from the Future.
Welcome to Escape from the Future, brought to you by Bounding into Comics. I'm your host and comic veteran, Brett R. Smith, and joining me again is Christian Toto of HollywoodandToto.com and the Hollywood and Toto podcast. Great to see you, dude.
Good to be here. Thanks so much.
Okay, so we've been talking about this off air, and it's just driving me crazy. So this story that came out maybe a couple weeks ago, we covered it, Bounding into Comics, about Taika Waititi's remake of Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits as a new series for Apple TV. This really piqued my interest, and I'm a big fan of Terry Gilliam's original film. I just watched it again for the first time, probably not since the 80s when I was a kid, and the same age as the kid in the movie, who's probably 9 or 10. But I've always loved this movie. I think it's got some, kind of pacing issues here and there. It's not a perfect film, but it's a lot of fun. It's a great concept. I always wanted a sequel. Gilliam wrote a sequel. It just never got produced. And of course, he moved on to do Brazil and then Baron Munchausen and on and on. But like I said, I love the original film. And when I heard the words remake and Waititi, multiple red flags went up all at once. I was just like, oh my God, this is the guy that helped emasculate Thor and ruin that character. And what Ken Branagh set up in that first Thor was so great and had such reverence for the source material. And then I learned later that when Waititi learned that accepted the job as Thor, he did it for money. He wasn't into comics. He didn't grow up reading comics. He had no love for the source material. He did it strictly for the money to feed his kids. He's quoted as saying that. But when I heard that he was going to be remaking this, I just said, what is going on? And why does this guy keep getting work, right? So let me share this really quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so first red flag. It turns out in an attempt to avoid causing offense, because apparently dwarves on screen are offensive, the remake will not feature dwarves, which were in the original film and a huge part of the film. It's an essential characteristic and dynamic of the first film, that the cast are dwarves, 6 dwarves. So, it's from the standpoint of they're all on the same height level as the kid. Gilliam said he wanted to film the movie from a kid's point of view. So he shot a lot of low camera angles. And he said, fearing that a child wouldn't sustain the film on his own, let's surround him with people of a similar height. So, they bring in little people, dwarves or midgets, as they were called back then. Now I think, like we were talking about, I think little people is the preferred
LPs.
Right, that they like to be referred to. So Kevin, like I said, probably 9 or 10 years old. He's a little bit bigger than they are, which is kind of fun. He stands above all of them, and he's probably also more mature than they are because they're very childlike. But in the movie, the characters are never defined as dwarves, dwarfs, or dwarves. Dwarves is what J.R. Tolkien created for The Hobbit. Those are the hobbits. But these little people in the movie, they work for the supreme being and they make trees. So as far as we know, they're kind of like elves, like Santa's elves. They're born smaller than humans and they have these talents to make trees. At the end of the movie, they get demoted to making shrubs because of the trouble that they've caused. So this is similar to Disney and the Snow White remake, where the 7 dwarves were replaced by 7 normal actors, because again, Disney thought having dwarves in the film would be offensive to a modern audience. That turned out to be not true when the film received enough fan backlash. So they scrubbed that idea, and they've been in massive reshoots ever since over the last year, reinserting the original dwarves, but they're CGI dwarves. So
is that more offensive? Less? I don't know what CGI should be more. Should we be more offended by CGI dwarves than actual dwarves? I mean, I
know. I don't get this. So it's clear Hollywood finds real life dwarfs on screen. That's offensive, to include even when they're an integral part of the source material. You can't have them. You can't have a real life dwarf on screen. If you do it as a CGI dwarf, like The Hobbit, you take a normal sized person and you, through visual effects, shrink them down like they did Sean Astin and everybody in the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I guess that's okay.
Well, they did it with Wonka, by the way. They shrunk Hugh Grant.
Right.
That could have been a little person role as well.
Yeah, it could have. It's insane because, you think about Peter Dinklage and how he really stole the entire series of Game of Thrones. Everyone loved that character of Tyrion Lannister the best, I think. I think he probably stands out amongst all of the cast as being a real high watermark. Why not take this remake of Time Bandits as an opportunity to give a real life, underrepresented group, okay, little people, dwarves, 6 lead roles in one movie? I mean, I can't think of a better opportunity. Dinklage, bring him in, get Warwick Davis from Willow and some other dwarf actors who have real chops, and make something special while adhering to the source material. This is insanity, dude.
It is. And, also it's this is what self-censorship does. You're assuming that people will be offended, and then you're making creative decisions based on that assumption, when the assumption is most likely wrong, and or who cares, and you're shutting out a community. You mentioned some of the more famous little people actors. I grew up with Billy Barty, was sort of the big name back when I was
time,
a kid.
yeah.
And I'm sure there are a lot of actors who are little people who rarely get roles, whose names we don't know because they're not attached to popular franchises, and they must be, kicking themselves as well. It's absurd, but it's also, it is the heart of this saga. It is an important element of Time Bandits. When we think of that, we conjure images of the old film and these little people actors and what they do. And again, if you want to make it inoffensive, write them well, give them agency, make them 3-dimensional, make them funny. Don't mock their height. Maybe don't even mention their height. There's so many ways creatively to be empathetic to a community without taking it away or making it woke. I mean, but they've chosen none of that. And the fact that this all happens on the heels of the Snow White debacle says everything about Hollywood. They're just lacking self-awareness. They just stepped on a rake, and now they're stepping on a new rake.
These are our new Time Bandits. And the little kid, that's Kevin. So he's obviously the shortest one now, when in the original, he's the tallest one, and he's the most mature. He also knows more about history than the Time Bandits do. They're just following this map sort of willy-nilly and plundering treasures and riches. And, Kevin is the one who actually knows. God, these ads are insane. Kevin's the only one that knows about history. They show up in the Middle Ages, and they're trying to figure out where they are. And he says, we're in the Middle Ages. First they rob Napoleon, and then they end up with Robin Hood, and John Cleese as Robin Hood. This is another thing about Time Bandits that's just so great is the cast. It's an incredibly deep cast. I mean, from Sean Connery to Shelley Duvall, Michael Palin, David Werner. It's an incredible cast. But this is ridiculous, dude. I just look at this and I just say to myself, that ain't Time Bandits. This is something completely different. And is Waititi doing exactly the same thing he did with Thor, which was having no knowledge, nor any love for the source material. It's kind of like that would, maybe 20 years ago, you would never get a job unless you understood and had some love of the source material. I mean, Tim Burton at least had read Batman, but I just think this is like this is the new prerequisites, how you get hired today.
That's right.
Have disdain or no knowledge or both for the original source material and come in and completely upend everything and change it to where it's completely unrecognizable other than the name. That's all we have. We just have the name, right? And Terry Gilliam's an executive producer on this.
He may take his credit off. There's 2 things going on here. One, all they care about is the name recognition, the IP. That's all that matters. You take it, you can change it as dramatically as possible. And the perfect example, which didn't get a lot of press or attention, was Good Times. They made an animated TV show on Netflix about the old 70s sitcom, which was I enjoyed it immensely as a young child. It was about urban Black America. It was probably more honest than most shows of the era. And they took it and they just changed it so aggressively that there's no real connective tissue at all to it. They don't care. The same thing is happening here. And also, you know, I always remember this. So years ago when they did the Charlie's Angels reboot with Lucy Liu and Drew Barrymore and Cameron Diaz, I remember Drew Barrymore going on and on during her press tour for the film, the first one, I guess. And she talked about the love and reverence that she had for the source material. Listen, the source material, it was just trashy. It was silly. It was frothy. It was meant to be three beautiful women. You know, it was not anything to be revered. And she revered it, and it was important to her. And she shared that when she talked to journalists about the project. That doesn't happen now, really. It's I've never seen a Star Wars movie, or I don't know about Time Bandits. We've got a new Time Bandits. I mean, it's this real disdain. And, you know, in an age where we really are more nostalgic than ever, it's a real hunger. Why would you go that route? But it's what Hollywood does. It's the disconnect.
Yeah.
It's this bubble mentality. And I would not be surprised if this is a flop. And listen, maybe it's just flat out good and it'll survive based on that. But
That's possible.
Possible. But also, I feel like Taika Waititi had his moment with was The Hunt for the Wilder People. The first Thor Ragnarok was different and fun. I know we kind of made him a silly character, but it was engaging. And also, I thought Jojo Rabbit was brilliant. And I think ever since then, something went to his head. His work is just off the charts bad now. I mean, he did that. The name has escaped me. The soccer movie with Michael Fassbender. It was almost unwatchable. And other films and other projects have been mediocre. So I don't know. I think he's just lost it. I think he's high in the smell of his own, maybe flatulence, as it were. I don't know. I don't have faith in this project, and it just seems cynical to the core.
Or maybe he's a talented guy. He's just picking the wrong things, or he's being given the wrong things. It's like you said, he's made some good movies, people that connected with people that had nothing to do with existing IPs. People like Thor Ragnarok for the comedic sensibilities. I thought it was too funny. I thought there was too much forced humor, but that's always been my criticism of a lot of the Marvel movies, sort of starting with James Gunn, just lots of forced humor. It didn't make any sense to me. And it started to become something that was different from what was launched with Iron Man and, the original MCU movies. But you're talking about showing open disdain. We talked about Snow White. Look at Rachel Zegler and how her complete and total open disdain a couple of years ago for the Snow White movie, and how this was going to be a different retelling for a modern audience. And the prince is a stalker, and Snow White's more about power, and it's all about being a girl boss back in this fairy tale. It's bizarre, and you're kind of seeing the same thing with the results here. So just to kind of cap off this dwarves thing, Hollywood's an industry that's always lecturing everybody about inclusivity of underrepresented groups. And they brag to all of us about how they hire underrepresented groups via their DEI mandates. Disney's, they're open about it. There was that graph that went out that showed, how deep the DEI quotas go, right? And the first place that it goes is casting.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, this is actually a case where the people who preach inclusivity are actually and openly discriminating against an underrepresented group, dwarves, little people on the big screen. So, and all the while taking away the signature aspect of the original film, the source material. But it's a great irony. That is one thing that Hollywood's able to give us in real life. They can't give us irony on the screen anymore because that's offensive. But in real life, they give us great irony. And it's just too bad that they can't kind of take that creative energy and put it into real irony on the screen.
So Terry Gilliam, you said, is listed as an executive producer. Is that correct?
He is. So second red flag.
Yeah.
Which I think is the most significant part of this whole story. It's been reported by a person who worked on the set, who's friends with somebody at World of Real, that Terry Gilliam, who has an executive producer credit on the series, was scheduled to spend 2 weeks on the set, but was so disgusted with what he saw, he walked off the set after just 3 days. So let me pull that up, because that's something that we also covered at Bounding into Comics. And I think
he
it's
sounds like
story.
A cantankerous fellow who just, is a unique spirit and doesn't, suffer fools gladly. That seems like Terry Gilliam in a nutshell. So I'm not surprised by this.
Yeah, there's an interesting quote in here that I'll read. Gosh, Sean Connery's so good in this movie. Okay, so here we go. As per an alleged crew member who reportedly spoke to World of Reels, Jordan Rolmy, Gilliam abruptly ended and walked off on a December 2022 visit to the series in New Zealand after finding himself massively disappointed with Waititi's handling of his original vision. He wasn't happy, said the insider. He kept groaning and making remarks. Terry was supposed to be there for 2 weeks, but he left after 3 days. His disdain for the entire project was obvious. You probably won't be hearing any praise for this series from him anytime soon.
And I was also imagine, I think if he's an executive producer, he's probably has been paid or gets a cut. So he may not find it in his financial best interest to publicly shred the series.
Right.
But I also think you won't say a peep about it, I'm going to guess.
Probably not. I'm kind of surprised that somebody actually leaked this, but I think it's a big story because this might be one of the first times where you have a remake or a reboot and the original director or creator gets so upset with what's happening with this updated version that he's openly vocal about it and has disdain for it. He might not be out there talking to the press, but I find it interesting that this was leaked, and sometimes things are leaked for a reason. Maybe he wants it known out there off the record that this isn't something that he's happy with. But it reminds me of Marsha Lucas. She's probably the biggest creative, from Star Wars to light up Kathy Kennedy and everybody involved in these new Star Wars films, saying that they're garbage, that I think she said that they're shit, and that the people creating these Star Wars movies, Kathy included, don't know shit about Star Wars. I think that was the quote, which I was pretty blown away, because we don't have anybody of any real caliber standing up for Star Wars from the original series. And this is one of those things. Jerry Zucker, I think, is pissed off about the Naked Gun with
David Zucker.
David Zucker. He's irritated because he's got a script. He obviously doesn't own the rights. The studio does, so they can do whatever they want. But they're rebooting it with Liam Neeson. I forget who the.
I thought Pamela Anderson was attached as well.
I think it was Pam. But he's not involved in it as well, and he's kind of irritated that they haven't come to him.
Listen, he knows that kind of comedy better than anyone on the planet. I like Liam Neeson casting, by the way. I think it's actually going to go well if he's given good material. But it's a shame. It's a shame that you're pushing these people aside. I mean, it'd be such a goodwill gesture to bring him. But listen, they don't bring him aboard because they're afraid of, they're going to get feedback they don't like.
Right.
And
no, I think that's right. I really do. I think that they think they know better. They think they know what the audience wants, and who knows how do they come to that conclusion, whether it's using AI or, poll testing and, doing screenings and stuff like that. But, or whether it's these DEI hires with their PhDs that come in and say, no, you got to press these buttons. We got to have these things. I mean, that certainly seems like where this one is sort of aimed at. But, we've kind of come to accept Hollywood to do a poor job with these remakes and reboots, just given the track record of failure. So I think some pushback from inside the industry is a very positive thing. I'm going to predict that the series is going to fail. And Terry Gilliam's words and reactions, which were basically off the record, will be that kind of I told you so moment. But, it's going to have a larger sense of irony, given that he's an executive producer on the series. And it's allowed to go out as is. It's
By the way, just I don't know if I'm officially allowed to review it yet because the embargo is sort of a little wobbly, but I've seen The Acolyte, the new Star Wars Disney Plus series. And I will say that watching the show, the diverse casting is so aggressive and so obvious. You know how we kind of joke there, every TV commercial now, it's a mixed race couple, and the diversity is just off the charts in a way that, there's nothing wrong with diversity, but when it's so obviously pushed, it just seems comical. It definitely has that approach.
Well, it's similar to what we're seeing in advertising.
Yeah.
I have never seen more gingers and redheads in commercials in the last year than I have in my entire life. And that seems to be the acceptable white person hire. And it's probably because they're an underrepresented group within white people. There's very few gingers, and and they're often maligned. Even the saying, you're gonna beat him like a redheaded stepchild. I mean, things like that, right? So they're obviously a maligned group that needs to have representation. But yeah, it's apparent everywhere, dude, and it is really aggressive. And it honestly, it's like when I walk out into real life, it doesn't reflect real life, and
Yeah,
that's
I
why
mean,
it's
there
so
are certainly
jarring.
mixed race couples everywhere,
Yeah,
but you don't see them like every couple is, that. It just isn't.
it's goofy. Yeah, I
It's
know
okay.
it's
We can
goofy.
have those choices. We've evolved in a way that we see a mixed race couple and go, "Oh, no big deal," and
Well,
then we see other couples that go, "Oh, no big deal." It's a non-factor, but it's being pressured into it in a really weird way.
well, and what happened to demographics? What happened to dialing in things via demographics? Because certain demos like certain things, and
Mhm.
some demos don't like certain things. I mean, you cater to demographics. That's how you sell things. That's how you figure out what your target audience is. And that's just been sort of thrown out the window because we all want to look like we're this, I don't know, diverse, country, reflected through pop culture or through advertising, but
Yeah.
it's not reflecting what we see every day. So
Well,
it's
I mean, Kathleen Kennedy, she kind of complains that the Star Wars brand is male and that she's trying to bring more female stories. Well, the brand is male. Maybe lean into that. That's okay. It doesn't mean you have every character is male. Princess Leia is the perfect example there. She was part of the original trilogy,
yeah,
core characters. But why fight it? Why talk about it? And just let your work speak for itself. There's already been a lot of stuff about the acolyte, the people behind the scenes, the creators saying, there's lots of trolls out there, and the fan base is cruel. Just quiet. Just put out your stuff. Say, listen, we put our hearts into this. We think you're going to like it. I'm just ignoring the criticism. I'm ignoring any sort of murmurings on social media. I hope you enjoy the show. Just leave it at that. It's uplifting. It's positive. It shows that you're confident about the product. But if the product is sort of mid, as the kids say,
mhm.
maybe you don't want to go that route.
Yeah, it's bizarre. I mean, the acolyte is helmed by Leslie Hayland, who openly said that she loves to make men uncomfortable.
Well, I think that was a different creator. I think that was someone
Was it?
attached to a Star Wars movie. And she had
Okay.
maybe a Middle Eastern sounding name. But you're right, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Um,
It's strange. It's strange. Little boys loved He-Man when I was growing up,
uh
and girls loved Barbie. And it's just kind of like the downfall of He-Man is when they introduced She-Ra, because no kid wants to be playing with an action figure that's associated with a girl brand.
mhm.
And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Girls like Barbie,
Yeah.
boys like He-Man. They
And
like
there are
She-Ra a
some
lot, but
girls who prefer the opposite. It's a smaller group. It's
yeah,
nothing wrong with that. You can all choose what we want, but why cater to that smaller group when you can cater to the bigger group and make more money?
that's the weird part.
Yeah.
That's the weird part. I don't understand. You know, I'm all for strong, empowered, fun female protagonists, but not at the expense of getting rid of the male ones.
Yeah.
That's dumb.
Yeah.
I don't understand this idea of representation and equality at the expense of another group. That
Mhm.
doesn't make any sense to me. Why, if you want things equal, make them equal. Make movies for men like
Mhm.
Land of Bad, and make movies for women like Barbie. But this whole thing's bizarre. It's just getting silly. The whole thing's getting silly to me, and
Yeah. Well,
and,
by
and
the way,
it pushes
what
people
you're
away.
taking Furiosa doing so poorly at the box office? It had its second weekend. It dropped about 59 or so percent, not making money. Pretty good reviews. Generally speaking, the general public
Yeah.
seems to like it. I didn't, but I was the exception. What's your take on that? Because that seems surprising.
I haven't seen it yet. I did see Fury Road. I liked it. I didn't love it. Why didn't I love it? Because it didn't have enough Mad Max.
I know.
That's why. Max is the character that we're all anchored to, whether it's the
Yeah, yeah.
first film or it's the Road Warrior. I saw the Road Warrior first, and then I saw Thunderdome when it came out, which was a huge movie, and Mel was a giant star.
Yep.
I think the same year he got voted People Magazine's Sexiest Man Alive. I mean, he was on fire. But went back and watched the original Mad Max, and it's a brilliant trilogy of 3 films. I've always wanted to see a grizzled, old, bearded Max
Ugh.
out in the wasteland, and I want to catch up. And I don't think that Mel is too old or out of shape to do
No,
it.
no, no, no,
I think
no.
whenever I see Mel with the beard, I just say to myself, what is George Miller thinking? Why isn't he bringing this superstar who
Yep.
I think is has been forgiven largely by
I think
most
so.
people in
Yeah.
Hollywood? Why are they not capitalizing on the wealth
Mhm.
and the talent and the star power that Mel still has? That's what
Yep.
we want. You know, Tom Hardy's a great actor, and I'm glad and I'm happy that Mel accepted him and gave him a
Mhm.
big hug at the premiere and was like, "Yeah, this is the guy."
Yep.
But Tom Hardy is not Mel Gibson. I'm sorry, he does not have the charisma
Mhm.
nor really the acting chops. I just don't think that they're even on the same level. I like Tom Hardy a lot, but it's just not the same. And honestly, I think why Furiosa is bombing is because, like a lot of the Batman spinoffs,
Mhm.
they don't have Batman, and that typically is where people kind of check out. Whether it's the
Yeah.
Gotham series or whether it's Joker, I just don't think that these things survive without the titular hero being attached to it. But you know, I'm wrong when it comes to Joker. I didn't like that film.
Mhm.
It wasn't for me. That's okay, you know. But for me, it didn't have Batman, so it wasn't something that I was really hot to see.
Yeah. You mentioned the Mel Gibson. I mean, certain sequels are cash grabs, certain sequels feel desperate, certain sequels just shouldn't be done. But a Mad Max sequel with a grizzled older Mel Gibson,
Yeah.
that sucker writes itself. I mean, that just makes me want to line up and see it. And to
Well,
get George
yeah.
Miller back and get that, where did he go? You know, he's more burned out than ever, but there's a flicker of humanity left in him. Something good still is within him, and you need the entire movie to get to it. I just
What we're longing for with that franchise is a Top Gun Maverick.
yeah, yeah.
We want Mel to come back, and then we want this perfect
Hmm.
um, new installment, which picks up where it left off nearly 40 years ago. And I just, you know, we're sitting here talking about why nostalgia is in high demand. Tom Cruise understands that. He understands that more than most. And I
Yeah.
think Top Gun is a great example of where you can take an old IP, an old franchise, and really do it right. And you know, we've talked about Top Gun a lot in past videos,
Mhm.
and how Hollywood likes to repeat the same formula. Where's that formula? Do you see it anywhere right now with any of these remakes or reboots? Given the fact
No, I
that they
mean,
made $1 billion.
when Top Gun was huge, I thought, okay, you're going to see copycats. It might not come right away because it does take time to go through the pipeline. But I see no evidence of that, no plans that evoke that Top Gun spirit. By the way, my favorite idea for a sequel, which will never happen for a million reasons, mainly because John Hughes has passed. But wouldn't it be great to do a Ferris Bueller sequel where Ferris is an office drone? He's got
Yeah.
a mortgage. He's got kids who hate him. He needs a day off so badly, and
Yeah.
he takes it. I mean, that would be insane.
Yeah.
And you know, it'd have to be beautifully written and everything. But and again, I don't even know if they could do that without Hughes's approval. And again, he passed away about a decade or so ago.
Yeah.
But I mean, some sequels just seem organically
Mhm.
possible or interesting. And even with Top Gun Maverick, I mean, where did this Maverick go? He just kept
Mhm.
failing in a way. He couldn't survive within the system. He's on the edge of being cast aside. And then he gets one more shot at redemption. I mean, that's just a natural
Yeah.
story.
It's an American story.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's a pure American story, and that's why it resonates. You know, everybody loves that comeback kid,
Yeah.
and that's largely what that story is about. And again, it's like you said, you and I agreed at the time that they were going to copy that formula and try and recreate it with something, and they just have no interest. You know,
Yeah.
Bob Iger said that it's going to be remakes and reboots from here on out because they're easy to market, and I think that's what it's about. I don't think they give a crap about a good story. I think they still care about having stars and having
Mhm.
big actors and whatnot. Obviously, it's the draw with the Fall
Yeah.
Guy, but you know, with the Fall Guy again, you know, no real attachment to the source material. You got a little
The
wink and a
name.
nod at the end, but
Yeah.
otherwise, it,
Just the name.
it could have
And
been
then
a
a
Top
name
Gun
that
Maverick.
most people don't even know about.
Mhm.
Sorry, people
Well,
don't know that. That show was revered maybe by some, but it's 30, 40 years old. It is not in the zeitgeist like other brands are.
yeah, yeah, it's bizarre. So anyway, getting back to Time Bandits, I love the original. It's really fun. Lots of charm, lots of heart, lots of humor.
Yeah.
It's sophisticated and yet childlike and magical. All the practical effects are wonderful. It's very, it's part action, part fantasy, part sci-fi, part comedy. You know, it's got all of that great Python kind of satire from Terry Gilliam and Michael Palin, who both wrote it, and also Michael Palin's in it. Very funny. He and Shelley Long are hilarious. But I love the satire. It reminded me of kind of Verhoeven's satire against American culture, American pop culture, and RoboCop a little bit. David Werner as evil stands out. He's amazing as the villain. And Ralph Richardson, this old English actor, brilliant as the supreme being, as God in this universe.
Is this time, is it Lisa Kudrow playing that character, or am I wrong there?
I think she's one of the Time Bandits. She's one of those. She's one of the women in that photo that I showed. It's bizarre to me because, you know, Time Bandits was a big box office hit back in '81. $42 million from a $5 million budget. Crazy.
That's like a ching.
Yeah. So will this new series perform equal to or greater than the original film?
Yeah. I
don't know, man. I'm just kind of doubtful, just because in so many ways, like we've been talking about, it's kind of unrecognizable as Time Bandits without the dwarves, without the little people. So
yeah, and that'll create a lot of negative buzz with kind of the Comic-Con crowd, which is where you want to market this production. That's your natural audience, and if you don't have that, you know, I don't know.
It's weird, man. I was always of the opinion that, like with Top Gun Maverick, you obviously want to, or even let's say Mission Impossible, when they first launched Mission Impossible, Brian De Palma, you obviously want to retain the original fan base, because that means you're going to have theater goers. You're going to have meat in the seats, right? And then you expand, right? You grow it. You bring more people in because you got Tom Cruise, but you got Jon Voight. You got this kind of guy with gravitas. You know, you've got kind of old and new. De Palma, you know, old auteur director working with an older franchise, but bringing something new to the audience. And that's, you know, I always go back to that first Mission Impossible because it's a brilliant film from the standpoint of reviving this old TV show that some of us only watched, you know, through reruns. You know, that wasn't my era of TV. You know, that's more of my parents, I suppose, you know, when they were in their 30s.
And also, I think the title, Mission Impossible, it's so good. And you pair that with the theme song.
Yeah.
I think that even gives Hollywood the ability to do whatever they want because it's so evocative and so interesting.
Well,
the Fall Guy is just like,
yeah. It's, you know, I watched some of the Fall Guy back in the day, but it was not one of my regular shows. So I always loved, I liked the character of Colt Seaver because I liked Lee Majors, you know, and I liked Lee Majors because I watched reruns of
Bionic Man, right?
You know, Bionic Man. Yeah, exactly. You know, which was something that, again, wasn't on. It was only on in syndication when you and I were growing up. So that was kind of our reference back there. So anyway, the original Time Bandits is available to stream right now on HBO Max. I watched it over the weekend. It's really good. A lot of fun. I hadn't seen it since I was a kid.
By the way, is there any trigger warning that there are dwarves in the movie? Because that could be.
You know, it's funny. I haven't, other than like, I didn't see any trigger warning about dwarves, but you know, sometimes I think with Prime, I've been noticing, you know, little warnings up in the corner when things start. In fact, I was on Pluto the other day. We were watching Dynasty. Okay. And we're also watching Dallas. It was the same thing. When it comes up, it says smoking, language, sex, some kind of, you know, sexual interactions, you know,
shoulder pads.
Yeah, you're right. Shoulder pads. Yeah. It's so funny because these are old shows and they're it's like the new PMRC. It's like Tipper Gore's out there, you know, giving us all these warnings on everything because we're all a bunch of decadent, fragile human beings these days that can't decipher things on our own, I suppose.
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, it's bizarre to me. I'm seeing that more and more. I don't think I've noticed that with HBO Max though.
Okay.
So,
well, HBO Max, they did the trigger warning for Blazing Saddles.
Oh, did they?
And AMC has a trigger warning for Goodfellas.
Right.
I think, and then Disney Plus has maybe Peter Pan, maybe Aladdin, maybe Dumbo. I think that's the main triggers so far.
Has HBO Max done any other trigger warnings outside of that?
Oh, maybe Gone with the Wind. I'm not sure though. I'd have to double check that.
Okay. Gosh, unbelievable. Um, I don't know, man. I don't know where this is going. We're such a wussified culture, or at
Yeah.
least that's how they treat us. I actually don't believe that we are. I think people are fine and they can figure this stuff
Mm.
out. But I think that the powers that be that do this stuff, I think this treating us with kid gloves is
Yeah.
almost
Yeah.
kind of like how you mold people into being these fragile pearl clutching
Mm.
wusses. I don't know.
Yeah, I think Dame Judi Dench recently came out against trigger warnings in maybe in theater productions. Like,
Right.
if you can't take it, go home. I
Go
mean,
home.
she had something blunt and right on, and I'm like,
Mhm.
but she's in her 80s
I
now. I
know.
mean, that's an old generation.
Yeah.
She's right, but
Well, and like we were talking about the other day on social media, we were on X. We were talking the guy that played Frankie two times or Jimmy two times in Goodfellas,
uh-huh.
Frank Servino, I think his name is. It's not Paul Servino. I got them mixed up, but it's Frank Servino, the guy that I'm going to go get the papers, like that guy. He came out and spoke out against the trigger warnings for Goodfellas and said
Yeah.
that they're stereotypes and that they're ridiculous and offensive, and they think that the film's offensive. I think your trigger warning is offensive. I think your trigger warning is.
I wrote about this at Hollywood in Toto. Where's Scorsese? Why can't he? Where's De Niro? Last time I checked, De Niro is pretty friendly with the press.
Yeah.
Likes to talk a lot about certain topics. Why can't he stand up for his own movie?
Yeah, or Scorsese, man. I mean, or Coppola. Coppola's been out there recently fighting the bad press against Megalopolis and talking about how we're about to lose our democracy or our republic. I'm sorry, he didn't say democracy. He actually said republic, so he was correct. And he's also talking about how the studio system is basically just sort of this mindless warehouse, bankrupt of ideas. It's strange to me that more of those 70s auteurs who've made some of the most defining films of the 70s and the 80s and the 90s haven't stepped up and said more about this, because it certainly would have been their position had they been, or when they were younger men. I mean, when these guys were young and in their prime, they were tough. And I'm just kind of like,
Milius.
What happened to these guys? Yeah, I know. I mean, Milius has got his own problems, right? I mean, he had a stroke. He can't even talk. But where are these guys that can talk, and why aren't they speaking up? Because like I said, I think that maybe it's male menopause. I don't know. But these guys don't have the mojo, it seems like, that they used to, or at least they're not willing to sacrifice standing up and saying something.
They don't have the fire
speaking out
in
of the
their belly. George Lucas recently came out and attacked those who critique the Star Wars saga for not being diverse enough. And
right.
Good for him, but that's something that directly affects him and his legacy. So that's why he's coming out, but he's not speaking for the larger artistic realm that we're in, the cultural landscape that we find ourselves in. But yeah, you're right. I mean, everyone should be speaking out. So it's not just the old guard should be the new guard. It should be everyone.
I thought it was refreshing to hear George come out and say that stuff and also defend Leia and the female characters that he wrote. And yeah, it was nice to hear him come out and speak up. And I loved his quote. He was like, well, everybody criticizes me about not having all these white people in the film. He's like, frankly, all those people were aliens. He's like, most of the people are aliens. They're not even white. They're not even human. Yeah. But he mentioned something about the discrimination against droids and stuff like that. And I've always found that to be, one of the great kind of classic tropes of Star Wars was that, we always find something to discriminate against.
Yeah.
And, and with AI and everything coming out and, this rumor that it's going to replace lots of jobs, now you're starting to see where people are going to be like Han Solo. You're just not going to like droids because they're taking humans' jobs away from them and automating them, Han Solo just hated automation. That's all it was, All right. So for those that want to check out Time Bandits, like I said, HBO Max. And then there's a 2014 Criterion Collection Blu-ray. It's a 2K restoration of the original negative. That's available. I'll link to that in the description if you want to pick that up and add it to your physical media collection. Sadly, we're out of time. Christian, what's the best way our viewers can support you?
You just go to hollywoodintoto.com and you can follow me on Twitter at hollywoodintoto. And of course, the Hollywood in Toto podcast, which this week, fingers crossed, will be video, going video finally. And I'll be editing that later today, but that should be the switch should be complete unless I have a massive technical issue or my son can coach me with the editing software, but we'll see.
Cool. That's awesome. That's exciting.
And then go to search out Hollywood and Toto on YouTube as well. I'll be kind of putting out new videos, not just the podcast, but other commentaries as well.
All right. For more videos like this one, subscribe to the Bounding Into Comics channel on YouTube. Also, make sure and like this video and leave us a comment. Have you seen the original Time Bandits? And are you excited for this new remake? Let us know in the comments. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we'll see you next time.